There is a moment after narcissistic abuse that people do not talk about honestly enough. It is the moment when your pain hardens. When sadness starts turning into something sharper. You replay the lies, the gaslighting, the humiliations, the way they kept you confused and then acted as if your confusion was the problem. And somewhere inside all of that, a thought begins to form. Maybe the only way to feel whole again is to make them feel some of what they made you feel. That thought is more human than most people want to admit. Because when someone has eroded your reality slowly, strategically, and without remorse, the desire to strike back can feel less like revenge and more like restoration. You are not fantasizing about cruelty for no reason. You are reacting to violation. To having your mind bent around someone else's needs for too long. To being made small inside a dynamic that fed on your self-doubt. So of course some part of you wants them to hurt. Of course some part of you wants them exposed, destabilized, unnerved, stripped of the power they held over you. But this is where the pattern gets darker. Because narcissistic people do not experience retaliation the way healthier people often would. They do not reliably meet it with remorse. They do not pause, reflect, and finally understand the cost of what they did. More often, they do something else. They use it. They absorb your reaction into the story they were already building, the one where they are misunderstood, attacked, envied, mistreated, or forced to defend themselves against someone crazy. That is part of what makes these dynamics so maddening. Even your pain can become material for their self-protection. So the question stops being, do they deserve to be hurt back? The more important question becomes, what happens to me if I build my healing around that? Because the need to retaliate can keep you emotionally organized around them long after the relationship should have ended. You are still studying them. Still reacting to them. Still imagining how to land the right blow, say the perfect thing, expose the hidden truth, collapse the image, make them feel even one fraction of the helplessness they produced in you. And in that state, even though your energy has changed shape, it still belongs to the same system. They are still central. Still occupying your mind. Still dictating your emotional climate from a distance. That is the trap hidden inside revenge. It can feel like power while quietly extending the bond. And with narcissistic people, extension is often exactly how the damage continues. Because these are not usually people who want peace more than they want control. Conflict does not always frighten them. In many cases, conflict feeds them. Drama keeps them relevant. Chaos keeps everyone disoriented. Emotional escalation gives them a stage, and narcissistic structures love stages. So when you retaliate, you may think you are finally forcing them to feel something real. But very often you are just stepping back into the theater they built so expertly in the first place. That is why so many people come out of revenge feeling strangely empty. Not because their anger was invalid. Because anger pointed them toward a real injury, but retaliation did not know how to heal it. The injury was never only that they got away with things. The injury was deeper. It was the way you lost yourself while trying to survive their version of connection. The way your instincts got overridden. The way your mind got trained to chase clarity from someone committed to distortion. The way your body learned to live inside emotional ambush. Hurting them back cannot repair that. Sometimes it only pushes you further from the quieter, harder work of coming back to yourself. And this is where people get confused, because refusing retaliation can sound passive on the surface. It is not. In narcissistic dynamics, the refusal to hurt them back is often one of the most active, disciplined things you will ever do. It means you are no longer willing to let their disorder shape your character. It means you will not let someone else's manipulation determine the moral and emotional architecture of your next move. It means you are angry, yes, but your anger is no longer available to be recruited into the same pattern that harmed you. That is not passivity. That is self-command. And self-command is one of the few things narcissistic people cannot easily work with. Because what they know how to work with is reactivity. They know how to provoke, bait, reverse, and confuse. They know how to keep an argument alive long after truth has died inside it. They know how to make your urgency look like instability. They know how to take your justified anger and present it as proof that you were the problem all along. What they struggle with is something colder and far more disruptive, a person who no longer needs emotional impact to feel strong. That is where real power starts entering the room. Not in the fantasy of destroying them. In the decision to stop feeding what made them feel powerful in the first place. And what made them feel powerful was not always admiration. Sometimes it was your pain. Your explanations. Your tears. Your need to be understood. Your attempts to correct the record. Your frantic effort to make reality stay reality inside a conversation built to erase it. When you see that clearly, the entire idea of revenge starts changing. You begin to realize that the deepest wound to a narcissistic system is often not you hurting them back. It is you becoming unavailable to the structure altogether. Unavailable to the bait. Unavailable to the rewriting. Unavailable to the game where your humanity keeps getting used as evidence against you. That is why boundaries matter more than retaliation ever will. A real boundary does not try to injure. It interrupts. It removes access. It says, sometimes with words and sometimes with silence, you do not get to keep reaching inside my mind and calling it intimacy. It says, my peace is not negotiable just because your emotions are loud. It says, I am no longer participating in exchanges that require me to abandon myself in order to stay connected. And narcissistic people often experience that as injury anyway. Not because the boundary is abusive. Because control feels like love to them, and losing control feels like harm. That is a crucial distinction. You do not have to wound them for them to feel the loss of access. Sometimes your calm is enough. Sometimes your distance is enough. Sometimes your refusal to explain one more time is enough. Sometimes the fact that you are no longer emotionally reachable in the old way is the thing they feel most sharply, because they cannot easily twist it into the kind of supply they used to live on. That is why the real question is not, how do I make them hurt? It is, how do I stop building myself around whether they hurt? Because once that shift happens, everything begins reorganizing. You stop measuring success by whether they finally feel remorse. You stop waiting for the perfect exposure to restore your dignity. You stop imagining that if they only suffered enough, your nervous system would suddenly release the bond. Instead, you begin reclaiming the places where they once had access. Your time. Your attention. Your internal dialogue. Your self-respect. Your emotional thresholds. You start learning that justice and revenge are not the same thing. Justice protects what is real. Revenge often keeps you tied to what is dead. That does not mean you become naive. It does not mean you stay soft in dangerous places. It does not mean you let abuse continue in the name of being the bigger person. You document. You leave. You block. You say no. You get legal help if needed. You speak truth where truth is necessary. You protect yourself with consequence, distance, and clarity. But all of that is different from making their suffering the center of your healing. Because when their suffering becomes the point, they still own too much of your inner world. And healing asks for something else. It asks you to grieve the fantasy that hurting them back will undo what happened to you. It asks you to admit that what you really wanted was not revenge, but relief. Not punishment, but restoration. Not their pain, but your own self back. And those things do not arrive through emotional war with someone whose entire structure was built for war. They arrive when you stop entering the battlefield as if something sacred is still waiting for you there. That is the dark truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is deny them the version of you they know how to use. The outraged version. The desperate version. The version still trying to win something human from a structure built on inhumanity. When that version of you steps back, the dynamic begins starving on its own. Not overnight. Not neatly. But steadily. And in that steadiness, you begin to feel something that revenge can imitate but never truly give you. Freedom. Because freedom is not them hurting the way you hurt. Freedom is them no longer determining who you become next.